All right, thank you for staying with the big story. Let's now have a conversation with the panelists in studio. We have Dr. Omar Oluga at our City Center studio. We also have Akelo Misori from Kenya Union of Post-Primary Teachers, and we have Dr. Solomon Jenga, governance expert. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on the big story this evening. I'd like us to start this conversation from that interview that Duncan Haimba has just had with Ms. Serem. Dr. Oluga, let me begin with you. She says she would give her team success rate of about 85%, saying we are making progress, and Kenya would have been much worse off if SRC was not in place. What are your thoughts? And the specific reason I'm asking this question is because doctors were on strike for a very long time, and that actually ended up making you see the inside of a jail at some point. What are your thoughts?
Thank you very much, Linda, and to all the viewers. First, allow me to say that it's very interesting that today also is the first year anniversary since we began that strike. 5th of December of last year is when the doctors, after a very long process of haggling and negotiating and going to court, decided to engage in industrial action, and today is that first anniversary. It was a very long, protracted strike, very unfortunate. Clearly, it gave Sarah Serem and her team quite a lot of sleepless nights. So yes, for us, we are also marking that first anniversary, and it's important because for us, we are still on the goal of why we did this. It wasn't just for us and for salaries, it was also for the bigger healthcare campaign and now I see the president talking about universal health coverage. So I think for us, it's also a reminder of the bigger healthcare system story, and for us, what we could do as a union and as a body of doctors to also highlight some of the pertinent issues in the health sector. Before that, we had just had 2,000 doctors quit. We had doctors not employed, and we still have some of those issues despite the fact that we got our CBA. So yes, today is also that first anniversary. But going to the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, what I'd say is it's quite a mixed story because we ourselves as a union, I think there are very few unions in this country that has engaged SRC as much as the doctors' union have, all the way from 2014. And personally, I've interacted a lot with the chair, Sarah Serem. So even as she was giving an interview, I was just remembering some of the moments. For her, as a person, as a chair, I think I would say that she took up a very difficult job. And she tried to do it with a lot of grace and resilience, and she's strong. I'll give her 60% as a person, okay. But I'll give the SRC, the body, the SRC, I think I'll give them around 30%, because in my own opinion, they were also doing the wrong job. Especially what they have highlighted about the wage bill, okay. About productivity. You know, if you look at their job in the Constitution is a little different. I hope that I'll get time to highlight on that. So I'll give the SRC around 30%, but Sarah Serem as a person, around 60%. She tried to be resilient and strong, yeah.
So the person would give us 65%, SRC, you'd give them, what, 30%. Mr. Misori, what are your thoughts? 85%, 65%?
It is difficult to rate Sarah Serem because, in my view, I don't think she merits such a high score. She could have perhaps gotten 30%, and the entire commission may be getting 40% because collectively they contributed to what actually did not measure up to why they were created. The Salaries and Remuneration Commission in the first instance was supposed to bridge the gap. The best practice the world over is to ensure that the wage bill or the gap between the highest paid personnel is about 25%. But as he exits the scene, she has still left that gap still yawning. In fact, over 500% difference between the lowest paid worker and the highest paid worker. But above all, considering that she was supposed to provide equity in the idea or in the area of wage, what has she left? There is no equity. She even apportioned herself the work which was not rightfully hers. Instead of setting salaries for state officers, she mixed everything, and now decided to act as a worker. What is there for the essence of having the constitutional provision at Article 41, that we have got workers having the right to form, join, and participate in collective bargaining agreement? In our instance, from 2015 to 2016, you realize that SRC REM team decided even to engage us in the Court of Appeal and even to the Supreme Court. What, therefore, was left for the employer in this case? I don't think this is a commission which is supposed to be granted even the 30%. It is a contradiction of sorts.
Dr. Njenga, so Missouri says she was supposed to bridge the gap and ensure that there was equity. She clearly, from where he stands, she was not able to do that. So 6 years down the line, how would you rate the performance of SRC?
Thank you so much, Linda. I want to just say that rating, for me, it's a bit tricky. And because we are rating an individual, or rather we are also rating a commission. But also, we should actually go to the other side of governance and rate probably Kenyans and ask ourselves, what grade should we give Kenyans? Because really...
Where are Kenyans coming in all this?
To be honest, SRC doesn't act in a vacuum. You know, it has to work in an atmosphere where leadership is gauged by those who are receiving the services. Now, me as a Kenyan, we should ask ourselves, what is this that we have realized in the last 6 years? You know, because we have seen a lot of strikes, we have seen a lot of, you know, issues, rotten leadership from the top, from the presidency, I will say that, to the down there, really. So when we talk about rating, the GDP of Kenya has really gone down in terms of salary and so forth. We are actually talking about the salary, but we are not talking about the lives of Kenyans. What are they eating? What are they drinking? How much are they using? You know, salary is not the only gauge to award marks to SRC. So, rotten leadership. Some George said that everything boils and rises on leadership. George Maxwell. So when it comes to the issue of leadership, what is this that they have done to Kenyans so that we can award them marks?
And that is
I'm avoiding, Linda, I'm avoiding to award marks to individuals and commissions, where else Kenyans are actually wallowing in poverty.
Daktari, so that is the question that I'll pose to you. What has the Commission done for Kenyans 6 years down the line?
I think the Commission has given Kenyans a raw deal. Because one, we have seen a lot of strikes. We have seen people, the MPs have come out strongly and saying that we need salary. But honestly, it has exposed the underbelly of Kenyans and also the gluttonous leaders. The SRC has tried in its own level, but also it has exposed the underbelly of Kenyans, and especially the MPs, whereby people are actually going out so that they can be added salary, and whatever they are earning does not commensurate with the service and the productivity that they are, you know, of their money.
Okay, so clearly, Missouri and Oluga would definitely disagree with you. Missouri, what are your thoughts?
In a real sense, what's happening is that SRC REM and her team decided not to perform the duties for which they were created.
Okay.
In fact, what they perpetuated, we expected an independent commission which could at least apply. I did read from her mind that she was talking about job evaluation. Job evaluation look, for example, workers in the public universities where we have non-teaching staff, the administration, and the lecturers. And the tool which was used and the methodology to come up with what they finally arrived at to give them the award was not commensurate with what a job evaluation is supposed to be. And look at Teacher Service Commission, where clerks earn better than the teachers themselves who are professional. So this is a commission which actually did not exercise its duty. But above all, one thing which must be taken into account, They did not act independently. It appeared that they really pleased the executive. Look at what they did just a week before this parliament was elected. The review of salaries of MPs to come to what it is. It appears that they were used to an extent to ensure that the executive is made happy. But this is not what this commission is supposed to be. We see it as an affront and as an enemy of collective bargaining agreement and muscling what the Constitution is as given us in Article 41 of the Constitution. Yes.
Oluga, so part of its role, the SRC is supposed to advise the national government and county governments on the remuneration and benefits of all other public officers and the principles for determining and advising on remuneration. And some of those principles include the need to ensure that the total public compensation bill is fiscally sustainable. And that is what Dr. Tari has been alluding to, that you have leaders who are getting to a point where they're very greedy, and it's a self-centered kind of approach where you don't look at the national outlook of whether or not a country can be able to afford some of the salaries that people have been calling out for. Is that a role that you think SRC managed to adequately play out?
No, you know, in this discussion of SRC, I think we have all graded SRC very poorly. They performed the wrong job. As per the Constitution, which you have actually read, their role was to set salaries for state officers, which they seemed not to do, and they seemed to act, as Akello says, with some influence from other quarters. I think I want to address myself specifically to the issues that SRC are set to have done, and then particularly on the issues, and she said that it was difficult for them because they don't control employment. Kenya does not have an employment policy, and in a country where there is no employment policy, at the same time where they were supposed to even advise the national county government, there was already a role for the Public Service Commission to do the same. It's also the role of the Public Service Commission to have done these job evaluations, to look at schemes of services, to look at gradings. So that's why I said that the SRC set to do the wrong job. So, you know, it's even very difficult to award marks for someone who answered a question that was not in the exam. So so the first place about the wage bill also is that we should look at a wage policy. And I think also the approach that the SRC gave was the very wrong approach, because then they started looking at the Kenyans who work in the public service or in the civil service as greedy, as this 2% who are taking this percentage of wage bills. These are also Kenyans who are producing. And let me just talk about the health sector, because that's where I have a lot of experience, for example. You know, when the government produces results that now 70% of mothers are going to the hospitals to deliver, that is productivity of healthcare workers. If you talk about lifespan increasing, if you talk about maternal mortality reducing, if you talk about children under 5 deaths are reducing, if you talk about investments in the health sector, for example, 87 billion being put over this amount of period, that is direct productivity. So again, SRC did not have any productivity center. They did not even know how to measure productivity in the first place. And that's why I think Dr. Njenga was talking about governance, and that comes to the question, as a leader, you have to know, how am I going to achieve my objective? So when they already condemn public servants into this derogatory term of this is only 2%, taking our 35% of the GDP, without knowing that it is the same public servants that actually are producing for the government, the same public servants are the ones that are being taxed, the same public servants are the ones that even, if you look at the private sector in this country is so dependent on what is said in the public service, for example, in the health sector. So even the productivity in the private sector, the taxes that the government is collecting is based specifically on these public servants. So if the government wants to condemn public servants as taking money that they do not earn, then I think that that is where they get it wrong. And I think Dr. Njenga already, and I wanted to mention it, he already mentioned that the GDP of the country has been trying to go down. It's because you are discouraging public servants. I think when the teachers were on strike, for example, we saw a lot of attacks on the teachers. These are the people that are in charge of our education. The education is directly correlated with the GDP. The health sector, for example, the health of our people directly correlates with the GDP. For every 1 year of a lifespan, the GDP can multiply up to 4 times. Okay. So if you condemn workers and start saying, oh, these are selfish, then already you are shooting yourself in the foot. And I think SRC set on the wrong tone because it was derogatory, it was belittling public servants, and the people that they were supposed to set salaries for, they did not. They kept talking about a wage bill, which also does not exist. Okay. If you do the calculations, the wage bill is not even up to 11 or 12%. And lastly, I think the SRC became about the salaries for the rich commission rather than for, because the wage differential, the wage differential in this country is still 1 to 48. Okay. Akello mentioned it. Between the lowest earning public service and then the highest. And I think those are, it gives them quite a poor mark in my own opinion. Okay.
Mr. Misori, so Oluga says SRC started on the wrong footing, and from where he sits, they actually did not play their roles very well. So clearly we will have a new team within a matter of time. Where should this new team begin to start having a conducive environment and a conducive conversation with unions such as the one that you are from?
Linda, thank you so much. It is important to note one aspect which the outgoing commission failed to do. They relied heavily in outsourcing their consultants, and this is what messed them up, because the consultants were coming to have a quick fix to the objectives of what they were given at a time. And some of the tasks they performed were basically a desktop. They did not go principally to look for real solution to the problem, especially when they talk about job evaluation. So what I would propose to the incoming commission, if it is going to be viable, is to develop internal capacity. The capacity of economists, the capacity of the staff to at least do correct research and survey to ascertain what is useful for the commission to work on. And secondly, there is need for them to also develop parameters of gauging what is useful for the nation. My colleagues have already talked about this lady has said that the wage bill, the major task that this commission relied heavily on was just controlling the wage bill. They did not even care whether the reason for which they were created, the reason for them to attract and retain the workforce for a public service like Kenya, that aspect was not done, because you realize as we talk even today before they leave or on the date of their departure, we still have lecturers on strike, the health workers are still not happy. Even as teachers, we are not as quiet. What we are relying on heavily, as it obtains now, is that we are having a CBA which is not, we are not very happy with, but because we wanted just continuity and for people to move on, we would wish to have this new commission come in, and we are going to engage them immediately to ensure that they do the right thing this time around. Thank you.
Dr. Ari, as we wrap this conversation, let's talk about the issue of sustainable wage bill. Sarah Serem says we have to get to a point where we are bold and we need an all-round effort. So let's talk about having a system or putting in place a system that will ensure Kenya has a sustainable wage bill. What will that take from where I sit?
Thank you, Linda. I want to say this, that in this country, I think it's only in Kenya where a governor has over 10 advisors. I think it's only in Kenya where a political, or rather a civil servant has 5, or a CEO has 5 secretaries. What is the role of the 5 secretaries? As opposed to, if you go to developed countries, a CEO is actually a person who carries himself in a manner that he is out there to give service to the people. But in Kenya, when we become, or I become a civil servant and I am given the position of a directorship and so forth, I think of even bringing my brothers and sisters and people who are related together. And I think this is a matter that we need actually to resolve, that leadership is about service. Leadership is not ability to amass wealth to ourselves. And I think even the SRM Commission failed to advise the central government and leaders that we need also, we have a lot of duplication. Like we have SISO board, we have sugar board, we have tea board, we have all these boards. We have parastatals that are actually they are not working, and they have people who are being paid. Where else teachers and professionals and and nurses and doctors are actually doing their work outside there. Other people come with their coat and they do nothing, you know. And I think, Linda, we need actually to have a paradigm shift of our mind, that leadership is about service. It's not actually just thinking about our stomach. You know, and I think this is the downfall of the SRC, that it actually failed to advise even in the county level, whereby we see a lot of corruption. About salary and so forth, it is good. But what are these loopholes that are actually eating into the public coffer in terms of salary, in terms of money, and so forth? And I think we need actually to come out. I think this is the only country in the world where we don't give professionals what they deserve. Someone who works, who reports to office at 8 and leaves at 5 is paid peanuts. And that person had been sitting on that desk
for
hours, as opposed to an MP who actually, let me not mention an MP, but we have even people who only attends one sitting in a week, and they are paid 500,000 Kenya shillings, while a nurse and a teacher and a lecturer goes to class from 8 even up to 8:30, and at the end of it all, they get a salary of very, very low minimum, figure. And I think we need to have the issue, we need to inject professionalism in the whole saga, so that at least we avoid even this issue of duplications. And I will repeat this, that the rate of corruption in our government is so high.
Me, corruption is something else.
And it has actually been, we cannot discuss about salary without discussing about corruption, because it is actually through those loopholes where money, the doctors don't have money, and we hear of paralysis in government offices and so forth. I think we need to adopt the mentality of private sector, where work performance and payment is paid and pegged in matters of performance, nothing else, not politics.
Okay, so I hope someone somewhere was sitting down with a paper and a pen and just taking notes, because that was a whole lecture. But thank you so much for your time. Gentlemen, that's why we leave it here on The Big Story this evening. Dr. Ouma Oluga, the Secretary General, Chief Executive Officer of Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Board. We had Kelo Misori, who's from the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Teachers. And we also had Dr. Solomon Jenga, governance expert. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. People, that's why we leave it here on The Big Story. Have a good night. Thank you for watching. I'll be back with KTN Prime in a few minutes. See you then.